Las Vegas, Nevada, November 1970, the Sands Hotel and Casino. Friday evening, just after 7:00 p.m., the sun has already set over the desert and the famous strip is beginning to light up with its signature neon glow. Inside the Sands, the atmosphere is electric. Frank Sinatra is scheduled to perform his midnight show, and the entire building is preparing for what everyone knows will be a sold-out performance. Copa Room, the hotel's premier showroom, is being set up by a team of technicians, stagehands, and lighting specialists. Backstage, the hallways are crowded with musicians carrying instruments, showgirls adjusting their costumes, and security personnel monitoring every entrance and exit. This is Sinatra's domain. He owns a piece of the Sands. He's performed here hundreds of times. When Frank Sinatra is in the building, everyone knows it. The energy changes. People move faster. They speak quieter. They make sure everything is perfect because anything less is unacceptable. Bruce Lee is in the building too, though most people don't know it yet. He arrived 15 minutes ago through a side entrance, escorted by a casino executive who owed a favor to a mutual friend. Bruce is wearing a simple black suit, white shirt, no tie. His hair is neat, combed back in his usual style. He moves through the backstage corridors with quiet confidence, the kind that comes from years of discipline and self-awareness. He's not trying to impress anyone. He's just here to watch a show, a favor for a friend who insisted that seeing Frank Sinatra live in Vegas was an experience everyone should have at least once. Bruce agreed, mostly out of curiosity. He's heard the name, of course, everyone has, but he's never been particularly interested in the Rat Pack or the Las Vegas entertainment scene. His world is martial arts, film, philosophy. This is something different, a window into a culture he doesn't fully understand but respects nonetheless. He's looking for the green room where guests are supposed to wait before being escorted to their seats. Someone gave him vague directions, something about a hallway to the left and a door with a gold handle, but the backstage area of the Sands is a maze of corridors, storage rooms, dressing areas, and private lounges. Bruce turns a corner and sees a door slightly ajar. Light spills out into the hallway. He can hear voices inside, laughter, the sound of ice clinking in glasses, music playing softly in the background. He approaches the door and knocks twice, lightly, with his knuckles. No response. The voices continue uninterrupted. He pushes the door open a few more inches and looks inside. The room is luxurious. Thick carpet, leather couches, a full bar stocked with top-shelf liquor, mirrors with soft, flattering lighting, a record player in the corner, and 4 men, all of them famous, all of them legends in their own right. Dean Martin is leaning against the bar, scotch in hand, his tie loosened, his jacket draped over a chair. Sammy Davis Jr. is sitting on the arm of a couch, cigarette between his fingers, laughing at something Joey Bishop just said. Joey Bishop is flipping through a stack of papers, probably last-minute changes to the show's script. And Frank Sinatra is standing in the center of the room, facing a large mirror, adjusting his bow tie with the precision of a man who has done this 10,000 times. He's wearing a black tuxedo, perfectly tailored, his hair slicked back, his eyes sharp and focused. At 54 years old, Frank Sinatra is still one of the most powerful men in entertainment. He's recorded hundreds of songs. He's starred in dozens of films. He's won an Academy Award. He's performed for presidents. He's friends with mobsters, millionaires, and movie stars. This is his world. And in his world, what Frank Sinatra says goes. Bruce hesitates for a moment at the doorway. This is clearly not the green room. This is a private space. He should leave. But before he can back out, Dean Martin glances toward the door and sees him. Dean raises his glass slightly in acknowledgement but doesn't say anything. Bruce takes this as permission to speak. He steps inside just a few feet past the threshold. "Excuse me," he says quietly, his voice calm and polite. "I was told to wait in the green room. Is this it?" Sinatra doesn't turn around. He's still looking at himself in the mirror, adjusting his collar now, making sure every detail is perfect. "Green room's down the hall," he says without looking. His voice is smooth, practiced, authoritative. "This is private." Bruce nods even though Sinatra can't see him. "Understood. My apologies." He starts to back toward the door, but then Sinatra speaks again. "Wait!" He finally turns around, his movements deliberate, controlled. He looks at Bruce for the first time, his eyes scanning him quickly from head to toe. Black suit, Asian young, maybe 30 small frame, maybe 140 pounds. Sinatra's expression doesn't change. He's good at reading people. It's part of what made him successful, but he doesn't recognize this man. "You with the crew?" he asks. "No," Bruce says. "I'm a guest. I was invited to watch the show." Sinatra's eyebrows raise slightly. "Guest," he repeats, as if testing the word. He glances at Dean Martin, who shrugs and takes another sip of his drink. Sinatra looks back at Bruce. "Who's guest?" Bruce hesitates for just a fraction of a second. The truth is, he doesn't remember the exact name of the casino executive who invited him. It was a business acquaintance of a friend, someone he met briefly at a dinner party a few weeks ago, but that explanation feels too complicated for this moment. A friend, he says simply. He works with the casino, I believe. Dean. Sinatra studies him for another moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. Then he waves a hand dismissively, as if the matter is too small to care about. All right, fine! He turns back to the mirror, adjusting his cufflinks now! But then he pauses, and without turning around, he gestures toward a small table near the door where a tea service has been set up, complete with kettle, cups, tea bags, and cream. Since you're here, Sinatra says, his tone casual, almost friendly, make yourself useful. Get me some tea. Hot, no sugar, and make it quick. Show starts in 20 minutes. The room goes completely silent. Dean Martin stops mid-sip, his glass frozen halfway to his lips. Sammy Davis Jr. looks up from his cigarette, his eyes widening slightly. Joey Bishop freezes with the papers in his hand, his mouth slightly... Even the music from the record player seems to fade into the background. Bruce doesn't move. He stands exactly where he is, his hands relaxed at his sides, his face completely neutral. No anger, no surprise, no confusion, just stillness. He looks at Sinatra's back, processing what was just said, understanding the assumption that was just made. And then he speaks, his voice quiet but clear. I'm sorry. Sinatra still doesn't turn around. He's buttoning his jacket now, smoothing the lapels. Tea, he repeats, more firmly this time, as if speaking to someone who didn't hear him the first time. Hot water, tea bag, cup, you know how it works, right? Bruce takes a slow, deliberate breath through his nose. His posture doesn't change. His face remains completely calm, but something in the air shifts, something subtle, but unmistakable. I'm not your servant, he says quietly. The words hang in the air like smoke. For a moment, absolutely nothing happens. Sinatra's hands freeze on his lapels. Dean Martin's glass is still halfway to his mouth. Sammy's cigarette burns slowly between his fingers. Joey's papers crinkle slightly in his grip. And then, very slowly, Frank Sinatra turns around. He moves with the deliberate control of a man who knows how to command a room. His eyes lock onto Bruce, and this time he's really looking, not scanning, not dismissing, looking. His expression is unreadable, a mask of professional composure that he's perfected over decades in the spotlight. But there's something else there too, a flicker of something, surprise maybe, or disbelief. What did you say? His voice is low, controlled, but there's an edge to it now, a warning. Bruce doesn't flinch, he doesn't look away. He meets Sinatra's gaze directly, his own eyes calm and steady. I said, I'm not your servant, he repeats, his voice exactly the same as before. Calm, even, no aggression, no fear, just a simple statement of fact. I'm a guest here, like you said. Dean Martin slowly sets his glass down on the bar, the sound of crystal touching wood unnaturally loud in the silent room. Sammy Davis Jr. ships his weight, his foot tapping nervously against the leg of the couch. Joey Bishop pretends to read the papers in his hand, but his eyes are locked on the two men standing across from each other. The air in the room feels thicker now, heavier. Sinatra stares at Bruce for what feels like an eternity, but is probably only 5 seconds. He's used to people doing what he says immediately, without question, without hesitation. Room members, hotel staff, casino employees, sometimes even other performers. When Frank Sinatra asks for something, it happens. That's how the world works. That's how his world worked. But this small man in the simple black suit is standing there completely still, completely calm, refusing, not with anger, not with attitude, just with quiet, absolute certainty. You know who I am? Sinatra asked. His voice is still low, still controlled, but the edge is sharper now. Bruce nods once. Yes, I know who you are. Then you know I don't ask twice. Bruce's expression doesn't change. And you should know, he says, still calm, still measured, that I don't take orders from people I don't work for. The silence that follows is suffocating. Dean Martin clears his throat, a nervous sound that he tries to cover by reaching for his drink again. Frank, he says carefully, maybe we should just shut up. Shut up, Dean, Sinatra says without looking at him. His eyes are still locked on Bruce. This kid thinks he's special. Bruce doesn't react to the word kid. He's been called worse by better people. I don't think I'm special, he says evenly. I just think I'm not your waiter. D. Sinatra takes a step forward. He's taller than Bruce by about 3 inches, heavier by 40 pounds, and he's used to using his physical presence to intimidate. It's worked for him his entire life. You got a smart mouth, he says, his voice dropping even lower. I have a respectful mouth, Bruce corrects, his tone still completely neutral. But respect goes both ways. Sammy Davis Jr. stands up now, his cigarette forgotten in an ashtray. Frank, come on, he says, his voice placating, trying to defuse the situation. Show's starting soon. I said shut up, Sinatra snaps, his voice suddenly sharp. He's still staring at Bruce, his jaw tight. What's your name? Bruce Lee. The name means nothing to Sinatra. His face shows no recognition, no flicker of familiarity. Bruce Lee, he repeats slowly, as if testing how it sounds. And what do you do, Bruce Lee? I teach martial arts, Bruce says, and I act. Sinatra almost smiles, but it's not a friendly expression. Martial arts? Like karate? Not exactly, Bruce says, but close enough. And you're here because a friend invited me to watch your show. Sinatra nods slowly, processing this information. Right, a friend. He crosses his arms over his chest, a classic power pose. Well, Bruce Lee, let me explain something to you. This is my room, my hotel, my show. When I ask someone to do something in my space, they do it. That's how things work here. That's how they've always worked, and that's how they're going to keep working. Bruce doesn't blink. His breathing is slow and steady. That may be how things work with your employees, he says, but I don't work for you. Everyone works for me when they're in this building, Sinatra says, his voice harder now, more forceful. Not me, Bruce says simply. The tension in the room is almost unbearable. Dean Martin looks like he wants to melt into the floor. Joey Bishop has stopped pretending to read entirely, the papers hanging limply in his hand. Sammy Davis Jr. is watching Bruce with something that might be admiration, but he's far too smart and too experienced to say anything that might make this worse. Sinatra takes another step forward, closing the distance between them even more. They're only about 3 feet apart now, close enough that Bruce can smell the cologne Sinatra is wearing, expensive and subtle. Sinatra is trying to use his presence, his reputation, his power to force Bruce to back down. It's worked 1,000 times before with 1,000 different people. But Bruce doesn't move. He doesn't step back. He doesn't look away. He just stands there, grounded, centered, completely present. "You've got balls, kid," Sinatra says, his voice quiet now, almost conversational. "I'll give you that, but you're making a mistake. A big one. Am I?" Bruce asks, his tone unchanged. "Because from where I'm standing, you made the mistake." Sinatra's eyes narrow. "How's that? You assumed I was someone you could order around," Bruce says calmly. "You didn't ask my name. You didn't ask what I was doing here. You didn't ask if I needed help or if I could help you. You just saw someone who looked a certain way, and you made an assumption, and you treated me based on that assumption." Sinatra's jaw tightens. His hands ball into fists at his sides. He's not used to being called out like this, not by anyone, and certainly not by someone half his age, someone he's never heard of, someone with no power or influence or connections that matter in his world. "You calling me racist?" he asks, his voice dangerously quiet. "I'm calling you rude," Bruce says simply. "There's a difference." For a moment, it looks like Frank Sinatra might lose his temper completely. His face flushes slightly, his breathing quickens. Dean Martin takes an actual step forward, ready to physically intervene if necessary. But then something shifts. Something changes in Sinatra's eyes. He sees something in Bruce that he recognizes. Not fear, not submission, not even anger. Just absolute, unshakable certainty. This man will not back down. Not for money, not for fame, not for power, not for anything. And Frank Sinatra, who has been his entire life around tough guys, mobsters, bodyguards, fighters, gangsters, knows what real toughness looks like. And he's looking at it right now. He takes a breath, a long, slow breath through his nose. Then he uncrosses his arms and lets his hands fall to his sides. "All right," he says quietly. "You made your point." Bruce nods once. "Thank you. But let me make mine," Sinatra continues, his voice still low but no longer aggressive. "I don't like being embarrassed, especially not in front of my friends, especially not in my own space." "Then don't embarrass yourself," Bruce says. It's a bold thing to say, maybe even a reckless thing to say. But Bruce says it without malice, without smugness, just as a simple observation. Sinatra stares at him for another long moment, and then, unexpectedly, he laughs. It's a short, sharp sound, not quite genuine, but not entirely fake either. "You really don't give a damn, do you?" he says. "I give plenty of damn," Bruce says. "Just not about impressing you." Sinatra shakes his head slowly, a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "You're a piece of work, Bruce Lee." "So I've been told." Sinatra walks back to the mirror, his movements casual now, the tension bleeding out of the room like air from a balloon. He adjusts his bow tie one more time, checking his appearance with the practiced eye of a professional performer. "Get out of my dressing room," he says without looking at Bruce. "Gladly," Bruce says. He turns toward the door, his movements unhurried, his posture still relaxed. "But don't leave the building," Sinatra adds suddenly. Bruce stops with his hand on the door handle. He looks back. "Why?" Sinatra meets his eyes in the mirror's reflection. "Because I want you at the show. Front row, my guest. Personal invitation from Frank Sinatra himself." Bruce studies him for a moment, trying to understand the shift, the change in tone. "Why?" he asks again. "Because I want to see if you got the guts to sit there after what just happened," Sinatra says ominously. "And because anyone who talks to Frank Sinatra the way you just did deserves a front row seat to the best damn show in Vegas." He turns away from the mirror to look at Bruce directly. "Deal?" Bruce considers this. There's no threat in Sinatra's voice now, no hidden agenda that he can detect. Just a straightforward offer. "Deal," he says finally. "Good. Now get out before I change my mind." Bruce opens the door and steps into the hallway. As he does, he catches Sammy Davis Jr.'s eye one more time. Sammy gives him the slightest nod, barely perceptible, a gesture of respect from one performer to another. Bruce nods back and closes the door behind him. For several seconds, no one in the room speaks. The silence is thick, but different now, no longer hostile, just processing what just happened. Then Dean Martin picks up his drink, drains the rest of it in one long swallow, and lets out a low whistle. "Well," he says, setting the empty glass down with a decisive clink, "that was interesting." "Woo, shut up, Dean," Sinatra says, but there's no heat in it this time, just habit. Joey Bishop finally looks up from his papers, his expression somewhere between shock and amusement. "You're really giving him a front row seat?" "Yeah," Sinatra says, straightening his jacket one last time. "I am!" "Why?" Sammy asks, genuinely curious. Sinatra turns to face the three of them, his closest friends, the people who know him better than almost anyone. "Because that little guy just told Frank Sinatra to go to hell without raising his voice," he says, "without getting angry, without backing down. You know how rare that is?" "Pretty damn rare," Sammy admits. "Damn right it's rare," Sinatra says. He pours himself a small glass of bourbon, just enough to wet his throat before the show. "I respect that, even if it pissed me off." Dean Martin grins, his natural humor returning now that the crisis has passed. "You getting soft in your old age, Frank?" Sinatra shoots him a look that could freeze water. "Soft? I'm giving him a seat, Dean." "I didn't say I'm buying him dinner or making him my best friend." They all laugh. And just like that, the tension is completely gone. The moment is past, but they'll remember it. All of them will, for the rest of their lives. They'll remember the night a man they'd never heard of walked into Frank Sinatra's dressing room and refused to get him tea. Bruce Lee watched the show from the front row, exactly where Sinatra had promised. The seat was perfect. Right in the center, with an unobstructed view of the stage, Sinatra performed for 90 minutes straight. He sang the classics, told stories, made jokes that had the audience roaring with laughter. He was everything people said he was. Charismatic, talented, commanding. Twice during the show, Sinatra looked down directly at Bruce. The first time was during My Way, and Bruce was sitting calmly, hands folded in his lap, watching with quiet attention. The second time was near the end, during New York, New York, and Bruce was smiling slightly, not mocking, not ironic, just appreciating the performance for what it was. After the show ended and the audience erupted into a standing ovation, Sinatra took his bows, waved to the crowd, and left through the back exit. He didn't speak to Bruce again that night. He didn't have to. The message had been sent and received on both sides, but the story didn't end there. Within days, everyone in Las Vegas knew about it. The Rat Pack told their friends, the friends told other performers, the performers told journalists. Someone told a columnist who mentioned it in print, and Bruce Lee's name became known in a world where he'd never performed, not for what he did, but for what he refused to do. He refused to bring Frank Sinatra tea. And in doing so, he earned something far more valuable than applause. He earned respect. Years later, after Bruce became famous, after his movies made him a global icon, people would ask him about that night in Vegas, about standing up to Frank Sinatra, about refusing to be treated like a servant. Bruce's answer was always the same. Respect isn't given based on who you are. It's earned based on how you carry yourself. If you don't respect yourself, no one else will either. That night in November 1970 changed something, not everything, but something important nonetheless. In a city built on hierarchy and power, where celebrity meant everything and appearances determined treatment, two men discovered they had more in common than either expected. They were both performers, both artists, both men who had built their lives on the foundation of their own certainty. And on that Friday night at the Sands Hotel, they recognized something in each other that transcended fame, money, or influence. They recognized strength. Frank Sinatra continued performing for another 25 years. Bruce Lee died just 3 years later, in 1973, at the height of his fame. They never spoke again after that night, never worked together, never became friends in any traditional sense, but they understood each other perfectly. In the end, that was enough. November 1970, the Sands Hotel, Las Vegas, Nevada. One dressing room, two legends, and 5 simple words that changed how an industry thought about respect. I'm not your servant. Sometimes the most important battles are won not with violence, but with dignity. Not with anger, but with quiet certainty. Not by proving you're stronger than someone else, but by proving you know your own worth. Bruce Lee understood this. And on that night in Vegas, he taught it to everyone watching, including Frank Sinatra himself. The lesson was simple. Respect isn't about who has more power. It's about who has the courage to demand it and the wisdom to give it when it's earned. Both men learned something that night, and Las Vegas remembered the lesson long after both legends were gone.